If you're shopping for an electric truck in America, you have a ton of options to choose from the controversial Cybertruck to the trio of General Motors electric trucks, the Hummer, the Silverado, and the Sierra. We're going to get a plug-in hybrid and a full electric truck from Ram soon, the upcoming Scout electric trucks. But I think amongst all of those competitors, the best overall electric truck at the moment is the 2025 Rivian R1T. And that is thanks to the changes that Rivian made for 2025, in addition to the fact that it was already a pretty solid option. In a nutshell, you can get up to 420 miles of range in your R1T, 0 to 60s as low as 2.5 seconds, almost 1,800 pounds of payload, and 11,000 pounds of towing capability. But also, the R1T is kind of a weird tweener truck. It is not truly a mid-sized truck. It lands somewhere between worlds, and that's part of why I like it so much, I think. Let's talk about what's new, what has changed for 2025, what hasn't changed, why you might want some of the competition, or why you might want an R1T. At first glance, this R1T looks a lot like the R1T we owned a few years ago. We have the big LED light bar connecting the two oval accent lights. That's a really distinctive look, but on closer inspection, there are some important changes. The first one is actually the headlight itself. This is the first vehicle on sale in the United States to have the new adaptive high beam technology that is finally legal and we will see in a bunch of new luxury cars. Basically, it allows you to keep the high beam on while you're driving down the road. Here's a quick clip from this morning as I was driving behind our own Grenadier out on the roads near me. As you can see, the high beams are on and they're illuminating the sides of the road. And that's all because of the multi-module projector system going on in these headlight modules. It allows the car to basically blank out the section in front of you where another vehicle is, whether that vehicle is going away from you or coming towards you. The cameras are reading that up there and they're adjusting the headlight pattern to allow you to see more while also not blinding the oncoming traffic. It's a really cool feature and we're going to see it in a lot more new vehicles in 2025 and 2026. Back to this though, the other change is also going to be obvious up front. We now have a charging status bar. So this light bar is actually smaller than before because they stick that green bar underneath that. I think that's a really cool touch. We also see something similar in the Hummer trucks with the blue accents in their lights. It's really easy to see what's going on just at a glance from a distance. Here's what that charging indicator looks like from the rear. Again, that same green pattern right there in the light bar. Now in the back, very little else changed. And one of the things I wish Rivian had changed is the location of the backup camera. As you can see right there, it's still just above the license plate. That is the lowest backup camera in a pickup truck that I can think of. Most trucks have them quite high on the tailgate. And that means that one of the things I complained about with our R1T has not been changed for 2025. And that is that if you do plan on towing regularly, your hitch is going to be down here. There's actually a hitch cover over that receiver. And this camera, it's not really looking down on the ball. So every other truck in the US, it's going to be easier to align your trailer, know exactly where to stop. You can actually see the receiver going over the ball and then get out and hitch it up. With this, it's much more difficult. You can see that you're in line with your trailer as you're backing up, but you have no idea where you are front to back as far as are you over that ball or not. That is something that has not been fixed, and the only real solution to it would be a top-mounted backup camera. This does look a little bit sleeker, and of course it means we don't have a latch module there like we find in most trucks. They put the release over here, but it does mean it's a little bit less practical for towing. I'm sure someone out there is feverishly typing away in the comment section, how dare you compare the R1T to a full-size truck like a Cybertruck? Well, here's how I dare, because the dimensions of the R1T really speak for themselves. And that's why categorizing it is a little bit tricky. It's 217.1 inches long. It is 6 inches shorter than a Cybertruck, but it's actually a little bit longer than the Hummer truck. I think most people put the Hummer truck in the full-size truck category, logically because of its width. Well, that's where the R1T starts to segment bust, because this is 81.8 inches wide. It is wider than a Cybertruck or an F-150 Lightning, and that all has to do with the track width, both front and rear. It's really noticeable in the back, where we have these big fender flares, gives it kind of a step-side look, I guess you could say. And that's because of the off-road mission of the R1T. Rivian really wanted it to have that wide and stable stance for off-roading. The counterpoint to that is that it gives you a lot of room in the back, or I guess the benefit of that is that we get width between the wheel wells in the cargo area that is actually better than most full-size trucks in North America. The width between the wheel wells in the R1T is 55.1 inches, significantly wider than the Cybertruck and wider even than the F-150. Although the F-150's total bed width, side to side at its maximum extent, is about 10 inches wider than the R1T. And that's all because of that really bell-shaped profile. The rest of the dimensions back here, those are solidly mid-sized truck. 54 inches long, if we're talking about tailgate closed, 55.1 wide, and just over 18 inches high. The F-150 has, of course, a traditional half-ton shaped bed. The Cybertruck, that requires a bit more explanation. Yes, theoretically, 72.9-inch items long ways will fit in, but that's because of what's going on at the back of that cargo bed. And the bed actually has quite an exaggerated funnel shape to it. It's much wider at the top than it is at the base. In the Cybertruck, the spoiler will affect the maximum size cargo item you can put in the bed. However, here, you could put something 54 inches long, 55 inches wide, and 7 feet tall if you wanted to back here. Not so in the Cybertruck, because the back here is perfectly vertical. In the Cybertruck, it actually cants out quite a bit. So it may be 73 inches approximately long on the bottom, but by the time you get up to the top, it's actually slightly shorter than an F-150 Lightning. It's around 65 inches or so. So you could put a 65-inch box, 7 feet tall, in that. So a little bit closer, I guess you could say. Now, this still has a tonneau cover. This particular model has the powered tonneau cover like ours did. It fits into this section right here behind the bed, and that's part of why the bed is a little bit smaller. We don't have a window back here, so some of this is wasted space unless you want to load things up on top of the cargo cover. Here's a better look at the dramatic impact of these wide fenders. It's about a foot, I guess you'd say, from that wheel well to the outside of the vehicle. It's a really, really dramatic flare. Now, because Rivian wants to make this an adventure vehicle, we also have some storage here in the tunnel. We'll take a look at that in a moment, but they have said this is also designed to be used as a step to help you get up to the roof and, of course, better up there into the bed. And before we move on, it is worth noting that the R1T was designed to accommodate a full-size spare tire there under the floor. Now, you can get a spare tire in your Cybertruck, but if you do, it's going to occupy a considerable amount of space in the bed. It's also worth noting that if you want some of the spare tire options in the Hummer, ditto, lots of space in the bed is consumed. The Lightning, on the other hand, they put its spare tire completely under the body, which is logical because it's in the exact same place that it is in a regular F-150. We don't have full details on the upcoming Ram or Scout trucks, but we know that Ram is going to have a full-size spare tire option at least. It seems that no modern EV would be complete without a frunk, and sure enough, every truck in this segment has one. This has one of the larger front trunk areas, however, but one of the least practical in my opinion. In the F-150 Lightning, the entire faux grille lifts up with the front trunk, meaning that loading stuff in is going to be at least a foot to 18 inches lower than in the Rivian. This reminds me a bit of a 1970s trunk, where it really is just a lid over an open cavern. This is certainly deeper and more practical than that relatively small frunk that we find in the Cybertruck. In here, we have a charge cable right over there, the air compressor fitting so you can pump up your tires, and a first aid kit. And then we have this floor that you can use either as a carpeted floor or you can turn over if you'd rather have that rubber surface out. Now, one of the reasons that the bed is shaped the way that it is because of what's going on here. We have a gear tunnel. That's what Rivian calls this. we get 11.7 cubic feet of lockable storage, and this is sized appropriately for 22-inch roller bags. I actually know a decent number of people that love to camp in their R1T because they can put the dirty gear in the back, and they can put their luggage or tents or things they want to keep clean in the front or in here, and then they put a roof tent on the very, very top of the R1T. So really kind of fits with that adventure-y lifestyle thing. Now, clearly, if you were to delete this area, you could use this storage on the inside, or they could actually have made the bed just a little bit bigger. Because it's no secret where some of this storage space comes from. It actually occupies a little bit of potential bed space. One thing the update did not bring us, 240 volt inversion. So you notice here in the bed, we still have just two 120 volt outlets. Also more full-size than mid-size is the payload and the tow rating on the R1T. You'll find 1,764 pounds of maximum payload, and this model is almost at that max, 1,702 pounds. Interestingly, from a base model up to a fully loaded model of the R1T, you don't really find much difference in payload capacity. And that's not what we find in the average half-ton truck in America. You will get over 2,000 pounds of payload in some half-ton trucks, but most of the ones out there on dealer lots will logically fall right around 11 or maybe 1,200 pounds of payload. Certainly low when you look at those fully loaded Ram models, for instance. You will find more payload in a Cybertruck, up to 2,500 pounds maximum. But the rest of the electric truck competition, Silverado, Sierra, Lightning, etc., they're actually going to be lower than the R1T. And they're not going to tow anymore either. Towing tops out at 11,000 pounds. Now, logically, that's because of the adaptive air suspension system that is standard and the fact that this body-on-frame design, yes, it is technically a body-on-frame truck, was designed for some pretty big heavy batteries. So let's dive into that now. There are going to be 3 different batteries offered in the various different trims of the R1T. And here's how they line up. If you get the dual motor model, all 3 packs are going to be available. The standard range pack, around 92 kilowatt hours, the large pack, around 109, and the max pack, around 141 kilowatt hours. You'll notice those pack sizes have changed versus the pre-refresh R1T, and that's because things got more efficient. If you get the dual motor model, 270 miles of range is standard. The large pack will give you up to 329, the max pack up to 429 miles of range. That's the most range, of course, available in the R1T. The standard pack, it's going to be limited to 533 horsepower. The 2 other packs with the dual motor setup, you get 533 horsepower standard, but you can opt for a performance upgrade that gives you 665 and takes your 0 to 60 from already quick at 4.5 seconds down to really fast at 3.4 seconds. This model, it's the tri-motor version. It's available only currently with the max pack. That drops range down to 371 miles, although Rivian says you can get up to 405 in conserve mode, where it disables the electric motors in the back. But when they're running, you'll get 850 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 2.9 seconds, according to Rivian. But this one actually was a little bit faster than that. And of course, if you want the fastest truck in North America currently, that would be the quad motor model. They're taking reservations. It's going to be on sale in a few months. That will bump things up to 1,025 horsepower, and they're not playing the same fiddly games with the torque figures that we see from some companies out there. That's going to give you a 0 to 60 time, they're saying, of around 2.5 seconds. They don't have official range figures for that model just yet. I'm expecting it to drop further, maybe down to around 350 or 340 miles. It's worth mentioning that although the DC fast charge rate is going to change based on the pack you choose, the AC charge rate stays the same, 11.5 kilowatts maximum on all 3 packs. Rivian does not at this time offer a faster 19 kilowatt charger, and that's something I wouldn't mind seeing in the max pack version, because this battery pack is going to take quite some time to charge if you've taken it completely to empty and you're trying to charge it at home, or especially at the office, because on 208 volt power, like you find in most commercial and industrial areas, that charge rate is going to drop down to about 9.6 kilowatts. So it's definitely going to take a while to fill an over 140 kilowatt hour battery. The design of the front seats did not get updated for 2025, so this is still the power driver's seat with 4-way lumbar support that we found before. And it's still going to be a little bit smaller than the average half-ton truck. And again, that's because the outside might be half-ton sized in terms of width, but the inside is quite considerably smaller. So the couple distance, the distance between my shoulder and my passenger's shoulder, that's going to be more like a Tacoma, more like a Colorado. The seating position, it's relatively upright and truck-like. Of course, we adjust the tilt telescopic steering column with the buttons on the steering wheel. We'll get to some of those other design choices a little bit later. And we still don't find all of the driver's seat adjustments that we find in some of the competition. So no inflatable bolsters or seat massage or anything like that. No extending thigh cushions or four-way adjustable headrests either. For a mid-size truck in America, rear seat dimensions are generous. For a full-size truck in America, obviously tight in terms of legroom and in terms of width. I have a rear-facing infant seat, as you can see here, with the front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and I have an acceptable amount of room. The collect seat manual and the car seat manual say don't put seats right up against the front seats. That's certainly something to keep in mind. The latch anchors, pretty easy to access and use in here. As you can see, decent amount of room going on inside. I'll go ahead and unbuckle this from the car. The latch anchors, pretty easy to locate under the seats, and Rivian also gives you some seat guides. I'm gonna hand this to my beautiful assistant out there. Thank you. And on this side, you can see the front seat's all the way back in its tracks. I have maybe about 1.5 inches of legroom left. Headroom, though, that's pretty generous. And I think headroom functionally is better in here than it is in the Cybertruck because the cab is much more traditionally shaped. It doesn't have that aggressive slope to the rear, which cuts down on rear passenger headroom and, of course, visibility in the rear. Depending on the size of the convertible rear-facing child seat, you may or may not have issues. Now, this one is not currently anchored into place because I'm going to show you some other things here in a moment, but as you can see, there's just about enough room with the driver's seat in position for me. But depending on the recline angle, you may not have enough room. If your child is in a forward-facing seat, there are some things to keep in mind. The top tether anchor is very, very close to the seating position. Now, I have removed the head restraint here just to show you what's going on. Rivian actually says in their instruction manual that you should go over the top of the head restraint if you have a single tether. If it's one of those split tethers, then you go around the head restraint. But this does not have the loop and carryover mechanism that you find in other trucks. So in many trucks, for instance, instead of this being a regular top tether anchor, it's a weird loop. You go through the loop and then you anchor to the adjacent anchor. We don't see that in the R1T. This is the anchor you're supposed to use. And the reason you're supposed to leave the head restraint in place is, as you can see here, there would actually be no way to properly top tether with the head restraint off because it simply would not get tight enough and then you'd have far too much play in this child seat. The child seat really should not be able to move more than maybe about 1/2 inch if you tug on it very firmly. Rear seat passengers have a fold down center armrest with a little storage area right there, 2 cup holders, and we have a little roller style cover to get into the gear tunnel. How comfortable is that gear tunnel back there?
I'm not going to be sloshing around too much, that's for sure.
Okay, it's comfy. You need a pillow back there or something.
I can make it work.
But you can charge your phone and your laptop.
There's a 12 volt right over here.
As we look around the interior, keep in mind this is obviously not the base model. Up here we have the hazard light switch, the SOS button, slide to the side sun visors, and new for the refreshed Rivian, we get an electrochromatic roof. So you can see you can dim it and you can undim it at the touch of a button. I think this is a really good compromise for the desire to have the glass roof, but also block more of the light. We have our surround speakers, as you can see up there in the headliner. This is a suede style headliner. We have height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger, but rather unusually fixed in place head restraints. Here's Travis there in the back, so check out the headroom there. You'll have to yell, Travis. You're 6'1"?
Just about 6 feet, but tall torso. I have just enough room unless I sit all the way up.
Yeah, it's not bad. Hair barely brushing the ceiling there. Now the seat design, very similar to before. Rivian logo right there. We have another Rivian logo actually right there in that part of the seat back, but no adjustable side cushions or anything like that. We do have lots and lots of wood trim inside and more premium finishes on the doors than we find really in every other truck out there, except for the Cybertruck. I do think the interior finishes in the Cybertruck are really nicely done, and both of these have materials, especially the stitching and the soft materials, that are certainly better than we find in the Lightning or in the Silverado, Sierra, or even the Hummer. And the Hummer gets really, really darn expensive. We have lots of wood trim on the dashboard, and the wood trim and color scheme is selectable, of course, because there are a number of different looks you can choose from. And then we have the latest Rivian software here in the center console. Now, a lot of the software you see here is actually going to apply to your pre-refresh R1T as well, because Rivian, very much like Tesla, continues to update software not just on the new models, but on the old models as well. This is where we adjust that electrochromatic roof, so kind of nice, easy touch there. This is also where you would find buttons to turn on and off the lights on the side view mirrors, open the front, the charge door, things like that. We also have all the various different drive mode shortcuts here: car wash, pet mode, displays off, etc. This software is so configurable and so frequently updated that if you're looking at this video and yours does not look like this, or the one in the dealer showroom does not look like this, then, keep that in mind. But let's just go over some of the basics here. Biggest basic: no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Instead, we just find the native Bluetooth interface. And of course, apps that are curated by Rivian. So we have access to Spotify, your USB media interface, things like that. This screen is the one I like the most that our Rivian did not have on it when it was new. We have battery temperature there, motor temperature, tire pressure, trip computer, lots of stuff, really easy access. And then this diagram is going to show you where power is coming from or going to as you drive along. And then if I put my foot on the brake pedal, everything's going to activate here. We can activate our conserve drive mode, adjust the height of the suspension. If we go over into sport, it's going to want to lower the ride height. And then here, this is how we engage launch mode. That's if you want the fastest 0 to 60 time possible. Still pretty darn quick in sport, but that is going to get you to that bonkers fast time. A lot easier to access, honestly, than the wide open watts mode we find in the GM products. In conserve mode, it's going to really try its hardest to be front wheel drive only. It's going to use the rear motors at initial launch, just at low speeds to help get you off the line. After that, it's going to be front wheel drive only to help conserve power. We then, of course, get the camera displays here, so 360-degree camera, front view and rear view. But you can see that rear view, what I was talking about earlier, it's going to be really hard to line up that trailer. Below the touchscreen, we have 2 of the 4 air vents up front. One thing that Rivian did not change is the fact that they're controlled via the on-screen controls. But if I look closely, you'll notice that unlike some EVs with controls on the screen, you can actually see the little vanes inside moving around. I think I would rather just have regular mechanical air vents and save a couple bucks, because I don't really see much of a point to that. Rivian does allow you to save presets easily, so you can swap back and forth between vent locations. I just think a regular air vent would be fine. Down here we have lots of additional storage space, big flat floor there, big storage area. We then have 2 cup holders that pop out of the center console. More wood trim going on in this area. This is where the RFID card gets read to enable you to start the car. That's basically functioning as the key. You can, of course, phone as key as well. And then both of these are Qi wireless chargers. We have a split-style center armrest that reveals a relatively small storage area. So even though these seats are only a tiny bit narrower than the average half-ton trucks, the big difference interior-wise is how close they are together, because this center console is definitely smaller than what we find in something like an F-150 Lightning. Now, like the Lightning, we have an LCD instrument cluster, something that we don't find in every vehicle, especially every EV out there. And this is something that I would really love to see, for instance, in our brand new EX30 from Volvo, is at least a tiny LCD. Now, this is going to give you things like status of the vehicle, whether you're in drive, park, neutral, etc. It's also going to give you that active view of traffic around you. The steering wheel, that's basically the same as well. We have wood trim on each side and knobs that are variable in their function. So right now, this one is the volume knob. This one would be used for things like the adaptive cruise control functionality if it was enabled. If I go over to the car icon over here, or sorry, the owner icon there, and choose the steering wheel button, then these become steering wheel controls. They also will adjust your side view mirrors, and rather unfortunately, they will still adjust trailer brake functionality. So adjusting your trailer brake gain and engaging the emergency brake, that's going to be done with the controls on the steering wheel. I'm not the biggest fan of that. The steering wheel, though, it's very comfortable, has a flat bottom there, decently sized grips on the side. If I could change just one thing, I think I would love to see Rivian put an integrated trailer brake controller somewhere else, even if it was tucked away over here on the side underneath the dashboard, something like that. I think that would be my preference. All right, Travis, are you ready to get the R1T out on the road?
Let's do it.
All right, so we are in the sport mode.
Okay.
And launch control can stay on. I have to admit, launch control enablement is so much easier than the competition. And then it says launch responsibly.
Let's
Are
do
you
it.
feeling responsible?
I'm not the driver.
Listen to that motor whine.
Yeah.
That was 2.88 seconds because you're in the car.
Oh,
so
hold us back.
That is below the 2.9 seconds claimed, and our best launch was 2.75 seconds. Actually, not even verified by the car. That was verified by our GPS accelerometer. The car thought that was just a tiny bit slower, actually, than the satellites in orbit.
Okay.
Peak G, 1.16 for that launch, 1.2 in our best launch time ever.
I think we were a hair uphill, so that's probably the difference.
Just a tiny hair. I mean, the amount of power here, though, is bonkers, whether you're stopped or you just stab it here. It just makes you giggle. And in the sport mode, it's kind of funny. I'll turn the launch control off here. But in sport, you get that motor whine.
Yep.
I mean, they've dialed the power up to those motors to the extreme. Notably less in the all-purpose.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's still plenty of pull, but it's not the same visceral, aggressive, assertive punch that you get to the back of the headrest there.
And then in conserve mode, let's see what we do here. Slower still.
Yes, it'll ramp up pretty well, but that entry point is nice and smooth.
We'll do just a start here
For scientific purposes.
It's much more relaxed in its launch.
Yep.
Even though, interestingly, now in conserve mode, it will use all three motors in this model, but it sends power to the back. It's not 100% front wheel drive. And so we should talk about those drive modes. So basically all-purpose, regular drive mode, conserves your eco mode. And in conserve mode, it's gonna try and send almost all the power to the front motor. So when you're stopped, even if you're accelerating gently, it's going to use the rear motors for just a little hair of a moment, and then it's going to turn them off, use the front motor only. That's going to be the most efficient way to drive down the road. And then it's going to do all the regeneration basically on the front axle as well. So you can actually see those little diagrams there where the regen is happening. Now, this is logical because you want the regen braking really to majority of it rather to happen on the front axle, because for vehicle stability, etc., that's where it's going to be. You have the greatest regenerative braking potential. That's why brakes are bigger on the front of cars, etc. But let's roll through the numbers. So 2.75 seconds, 0 to 60, 123 feet, 60 to 0. That is better than the old quad motor R1T.
Yeah, which still exists, but in a new format. So you get so much more in the tri-motor. It's a very small thing, but they also switched the color scheme. So now that, like you said, that quad motor performance was the top dog. That was the yellow color accents. We get the yellow color accents in the tri. If you want more power, it's now blue.
Yep. And our old quad motor, 0 to 60 to basically 3 seconds, 60 to 0, 128 feet. So actually notable improvements in both of those areas. If you want to go to the next bonkers level, we have not been able to access some of those early test new quad motor models, but folks that have been getting 2.4 to 2.5 seconds, 0 to 60. So if you think this is batshit already, just check out the upcoming bonkers quad motor model. The two motors in the back, same two motors you're going to find in the front of that quad motor model, and they're now oil cooled apparently for better heat rejection.
See, now I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with it, but I was at the initial drive for that new quad motor, and I got to take that down the drag strip 130 miles an hour on the quarter mile. It was cruising.
Yeah, and quarter miles often in EVs, they kind of run out of steam at the top end, but not when you got four big old motors.
Yeah, no, and that thing will boogie for sure.
Yeah. Other thing that Rivian has definitely addressed is the tuning of the adaptive air suspension. I would say it's still a little peculiar if you are used to an adaptive air suspension in, I don't know, a Ram truck, because there's one available there, or a Grand Cherokee, something like that. Those air suspensions definitely feel a bit more normative. I also think that the one in the Cybertruck is a bit cushier, a bit more luxury car, I guess you would say. This feels just a little bit unusual. It feels a little bit firmer. Pre-refresh, there were some odd oscillations and floaty natures in the corners that were a little bit funky. They've banished those, but grip is fantastic in here.
Well, and they have two different suspensions now between the R1S and the R1T. So I think having different directions really does help fine-tune each individual vehicle for its use case.
But this one, when it comes to the handling score, definitely going to give this an A. I have to say also on the ride score, now finally an A as well. You are going to get a pretty cushy ride in the F-150 Lightning, but It's not going to have the adaptive air functionality, and here you can adjust the ride height up to nearly as high as the Cybertruck and the Hummer. Those will get a little bit higher if you are really patient with those drive modes. But due to the differing dimensions, you actually don't need to get quite as high in the R1T. The ride quality is going to drop, though, if you go into the conserve mode, because it's going to default to a lower ride height for better aerodynamics. The regular standard ride height is going to be the best. We have the choice now of soft, firm, and moderate for the ride feel. Are you feeling much difference?
I haven't spent enough time here in the seat, but it's not an enormous difference. There are some vehicles you can see there's a very wide range, and this one's a little bit smaller in that variability.
Cabin noise, 69 decibels at 50 miles an hour, so this is still one of the quietest trucks around. Does the motor noise bug you? For me, I actually think that's kind of a feature. It's sort of like, you know, the muscle car V8 roar. This is the electric equivalent of that in a way.
Yeah, it's not here at these low speeds at low power output. So it being at the top, presumably you're trying to get the most out of the experience. And it's one of the biggest complaints about EVs is that they're too quiet. There's nothing there. So you do get some of that noise at the top. I think, like you said, I think that's a feature. Yeah. And there are EVs adding noise in. You know, General Motors wide open watts or watts to freedom mode.
It'll think.
Yeah, that pushes a lot of noise at you. This is a much more natural use of it.
Because if you're accelerating pretty briskly here, you're not really hearing much noise.
No, just the faintest little,
Unless your mother's Sabine Schmidt going around the ring, you're probably not going to floor it with a lot of folks in the car.
Yeah.
So most people are probably never going to hear that. But if you want it, you know, this does have the bonkers motor whine that you know, I find kind of intoxicating.
Yeah, none of it's piercing. I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
You can hear it, but motor whine, this one is not grating. This is not going to get at you.
On the efficiency front, we've been averaging 2.2 miles per kilowatt hour. Of course, with our zipping around here and the testing, we've dropped that down to 2.1. That's, I think, pretty reasonable. It's definitely better than our R1T. If you drive it in conserve mode, you can obviously bump that up in steady state highway travel. But, you know, I live up here in the mountains, so obviously there's going to be a loss in efficiency for that. It is definitely more efficient than a Lightning or the Silverado or the Sierra or the Hummer.
Yep.
Cybertruck, though, is relatively efficient.
Yeah, which again is weird for the shape. People kind of assume this slab-sided thing. But the Cybertruck had the most potential to be kind of the teardrop shape. I mean, it's a very slab-sided teardrop, but that's kind of the dimensions. This really was built to be an efficiency, not expert, but plus. You know, because it's not an F-150 Lightning, which is just an F-150. The Silverado obviously is a little bit smoother on the electric end than it is on the standard end, but there are plenty of smooth edges here, nice rounded features to it. So I would expect this to be a little bit better. And like I said, something like conserve mode is going to drop you down. So the fact that this isn't the biggest, tallest thing also is going to help towards that efficiency.
I will say in our preliminary range tests with the Cybertruck, because we had one from a viewer, thanks to our viewers that occasionally let us borrow things, the Cybertruck was still a little lower efficiency than this model if this one was in conserve. So conserve definitely helps you out there.
Yep.
We do have that bigger battery pack, which is a nice touch in the Rivian too. And on the charging front, just before we get to pricing, I was surprised in some independent testing, we have not been able to test this one back to back with the Cybertruck, but some folks out there have, and they're about the same from 10% to 100% full at a DC fast charge station, but there are pros and cons to each. So if you just want a quick top up to 100 miles of range, Cybertruck beats this. If you want to go to 80%, this beats the Cybertruck. But by the time you've gone all the way to 100%, they're within 1 minute of each other as far as that total charge time. But this one is going to get you further on that complete charge because the battery is bigger.
Yeah, that's one of those weird things about these measurements is that, you know, they ask the 20 to 80%, 10 to 100%. These figures do not always factor in the fact that these batteries are different sizes. You get more or less for the electricity involved. So it's a nice relative comparison, but they're not necessarily relative stats. So worth noting, but I think the long and short of it is that both of the, like a Cybertruck and a Rivian, are going to be very, very close when you are on a longer drive and you need to top up on the way there.
Before I dive into pricing, let me plug our merch. You'll find shirts like this charge connector shirt or this fun play on the BZ4X name, you'll find these on the merch store. And of course, you'll find us on Patreon. You can support us by joining this channel down below, all of that good stuff. Now let's dive into the pricing. I started this video with the intention to make it shorter than normal, and instead the opposite happened. So I have separated the pricing and comparison section into a separate video. It's unlisted, so that way I don't bug all the people out there that don't want to watch that or don't care about that. But you can find it either in the description of this video or down there in the pinned comment section. Thanks for watching.